Nobody heard him, the dead man, but still he lay moaning. I was much further out than you thought, and not waving, but drowning. Poor chap, he always loved larking, and now he's dead. It must have been too cold for him. His heart gave way, they said. Oh, no, no, no. It was too cold always. Still, the dead one lay moaning. I was much too far out all my life, and not waving, but drowning. Taking a comfortable seat, feeling the presence of all my friends here. Just keeping your feet flat on the floor, hands facing upward on your lap. And we're using this poem to take a negative way into the present, to take a via negativa and catch the current of life. Softening the muscles of the face, straightening the back, lengthening the neck just a little bit by a couple of millimeters, if it's possible. Softening the shoulders. Taking off the diving suit and feeling that lightness, lifting the burden off the chest. And then you let it fall again. Maybe deepening the breath from 3 counts in to 4. Hitting 5 counts out on the exhale. Now we're in it. Whatever image works for you, whether it be cathedral, or whether it be feeling the current of life and not struggling so much against it. It might feel oddly placid, or it might be that your thoughts are racing. But it really doesn't matter. The fact is that you're noticing. And that's the whole point of the meditation. If you feel yourself tightening, just take off that iron suit, feeling the soles of your feet flat against the floor. Noticing whatever discomfort you might be feeling in the calves or the thighs or the back. Just paying attention to which parts of you almost instantly fall back into that guarded, defended place. For me, it's my shoulders or around my neck. The life of the Buddha, Thich Nhat Hanh says, is one of peace, joy, and freedom, not afraid of or attached to anything. That's our theme this semester. That's the buoyancy we're after. Not Waving, but Drowning by Stevie Smith. Nobody heard him, the dead man, but still he lay moaning. I was much further out than you thought, and not waving, but drowning. Poor chap, He always loved larking, and now he's dead. It must have been too cold for him. His heart gave way, they said. Oh, no, no, no. It was too cold always. Still, the dead one lay moaning. I was much too far out all my life, and not waving, but drowning. Stevie Smith published this poem in 1957. She was born in 1902 in Yorkshire, and she lived until the early 1970s. So she experienced firsthand a historical confusion that must have been, for that generation, one of the most dramatic of all time, to go from horses and buggies to a moon landing in one lifetime. And her poems were often about, as well as being kind of light on the surface, like this man waving, they were often about drowning. They were often about the reality that hid itself behind appearances. And the first thing I want to say about the poem is that it's not so much a poem about this man's failure to connect as it is an indictment of our unwillingness to see him or hear him. Because this man is severed from the world already. He's a dead man. Uh, and I was much too far out all my life, not waving, but drowning, leaving us with that, not so much a volta or a turn in the poem, but a feeling of finality for his story. Tells me that this is really about an urging for us to look deeper into the reality behind what we think is true. It's a poem about perception, the am I sure question that comes up so often in the poems that I've chosen this year, and not on purpose. It just seems to be the place that I'm in as I'm looking to curate this series. Perception is an important part of this poem, but also a term that comes out of Buddhism, which is translated as confusion and sometimes as ignorance, and the term is moha. Confusion and ignorance are slightly different, and I won't get into that. But the term confusion has to do with confusion about the separateness of reality. If one's confused in Buddhism, it means that they don't see the true nature, the true emptiness of separate identities that is the basis and foundation for our entire reality. You're confused because you think that you're separate, or maybe you think that the rules don't apply to you. So it's a very deep teaching, even though on the surface, as a rhymed poem, a short poem with even a little bit of a punchline with that refrain, it comes off light, but it goes very, very deep. So the man is given a chance to speak in the poem. And in this way, it reminds me of Dickinson's poems, especially that I could not see to see at the end of I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died. What happens in that poem by Dickinson is that the dying person is ready for the light to appear and for all of their expectations to be filled. And at that moment of truth, a fly buzzes by with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz and gets between the light and the dying person. It's very similar. There's a kind of confusion that occurs right at the moment when you think the ultimate clarity is supposed to come. So this poem is rich in that sense. It comes out of that Dickinsonian, almost symbolist tradition. Last week we talked about mudita, and mudita is the experience of joy for a person at a distance, where we're not getting involved in their experience, but instead celebrating their advancement. And you might notice that this poem is a little bit of its opposite. It's the shadow side of mudita, where we're standing apart from a person and not really involved at all and not seeing their experience. That's confusion too. And so the antidote for that confusion, and I think Stevie Smith is suggesting this, is metta. It's the first of the four abodes, and it's a reaching out. So the reaching out of metta is what I want to focus on today. People are suffering behind their larking. And how do we see behind their larking into what's really going on? And then what do we do about it? So the last thing I'll say about the poem is that the American Red Cross, in its instructions on how to save a drowning person, tell us that we shouldn't go into the water to save them, because very often people drown themselves trying to help others who are struggling against the current. So what do we do? Their instructions are reach or throw, don't go. And metta is that perfect reaching out. It's the beginning of compassion. Remember that the abodes begin with metta, with friendliness, and then from that reaching out, there's compassion, there's the holding on. So reaching out with a pole and bringing someone in from the water is an act of compassion. And then there's mudita, there's the stepping back. And then that last abode that I spoke of, the letting go, equanimity, upekkha, is the distance again. So it moves like a wave. But this metta is the act of seeing, the act of hearing what's really going on behind the larking, and the reaching out that results of that. So in the second half of the meditation, I want to do a little metta around this advice from the American Red Cross, and just think about those of us around us who are drowning, and even ourselves struggling against the current in our iron suit. So going back into it, finding that space again of stillness, that placidness, undefended. Feet flat. Hands facing upward on your lap if that's comfortable. Softening the belly. This is the metta practice. This is the reach or throw, don't go. This is the reaching out from a distance. Typically, metta wishes mental and physical health and well-being and freedom. Sharon Salzberg's book on loving kindness is the perfect example of this practice. I highly recommend it. But there are other ways of wishing well-being. There's other language that I'd like to use today in the spirit of this poem. I think of those words of Padre Pio that I used when we spoke about William Stafford. Don't worry. Or the words of, say, a great coach. You've got this. You can handle this. Or the words of a sponsor. You're not alone. The rules apply to you. We're giving and getting meta all the time in our own language. We can even see ourselves as the drowning person. We can step back from that drowning and not identify with it and give ourselves the same messaging. So imagining a beloved partner or a child or an ailing parent, struggling against the current of life in their own way. Just reaching out with the words, you've got this. You're not alone. Michael Singer's great phrase, you can handle this. Padre Pio, don't worry. Imagine a neutral person, someone you don't know, maybe someone who is suffering, who puts on a facade of larking in their own way. You're not alone. Now, the difficult person. You feel that irritation or that annoyance. How do we see beyond that? How do we hear what's really going on beyond that waving? And then truly wishing them well. You've got this. You're not alone. You can handle even this. Don't worry. And as I often do, I save myself for last because it's the hardest to access. It's much easier for me to enter into this with a beloved in mind because my heart's available. But I have to go deeper and deeper in order to get to that place where I can really access that part of myself that's struggling against the current. That panicked part, that anxious part, all the opposites of what it is to live the life of a Buddha, that craving part or that part that's afraid, that part that's saying, oh, no, 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 no. Reach out, throw, don't go. Don't attach your identity to those feelings. Just reach out with your pole and say, you've got this. You're not alone. You can handle this. Not Waving but Drowning by Stevie Smith. Nobody heard him, the dead man, but still he lay moaning. I was much further out than you thought, and not waving but drowning. Poor chap, he always loved larking, and now he's dead. It must have been too cold for him. His heart gave way, they said. Oh, no, no, no. It was too cold always. Still the dead one lay moaning. I was much too far out all my life, and not waving but drowning.